We get into the technical side of planning and other things. You've shared what made you so passionate about helping people. I know you had a personal story to that, which I think is very, apropos to the beginning of this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So Nick gave me a call, let me know a little bit about what he was doing, and asked what topic I wanted to talk about. And the main topic that I see recurring again and again is long-term care planning. And I don't mean long-term care insurance. I'm not trying to sell you. I'm trying to get you to understand, hopefully, at the end of this, how important and critical it is to plan for life events. And that is really because, like most things in life, my professional opinion has been influenced by personal experience. So I want to share a little bit about my family history. So my grandfather, his name was Ralph. He was a blue-collar electrician. He worked hard his whole life. 6'2", big, robust man, and he enjoyed retirement. He was active in the community. He actually was a musician. He played in a bluegrass band, and he was so good he got invited to play with Alison Krauts, which, if you know who that is, it's a country music singer. One day, he was at breakfast eating his cereal, and his face started drooping, and his words started to become slurred. Obviously, he was having a massive stroke. He survived that stroke, but for the next 5 years of his life, he was left completely nonverbal. So he could not speak and he could not write. And so he went from 100% independent, enjoying life, to 100% dependent overnight. We did not have a plan as a family. This happened in my younger years. Didn't really understand the impact and the importance of that. And so we had to scramble, and he ended up moving in with my mother for those 5 years. She was the sole caregiver, which means she had to alter her work and retire early to try and take care of him. I want to fast forward to his end of life. So he started going into heart failure. And when he was going into this heart failure, his legs began to swell. And I'm not trying to get graphic, but his skin started breaking open. And so he needed 24-hour care, more than what my mother could give. At that time, because he was blue collar, he did not have a whole lot of money, so Medicaid kicked in. When Medicaid kicks in, you don't get to choose where you go, right? The state basically says, here's an open spot to go. So it was over an hour away. Because it was so far, my mother and I took turns. So one day I would go and check on him and sit with him. The next day my mother would. So I went in there and met with the doctor. The doctor said, his legs are splitting open. These wounds need care. They must be cleaned out. They must be wrapped every single day. So I waited for the nurse to come by, and I waited and I waited. And pretty soon I needed to leave to go pick up my small child from daycare. I had to pick him up by a certain time. So on a whim, I pulled the bandage down and I wrote the date that bandage was. And I told the nurse, I said, please come and change them. But I was thinking, something's just not right. They're just not coming around. And I get emotional about this. So next day, my mother was supposed to come and check on my grandfather. Something happened. She wasn't able to make it. So fast forward yet another day. So now we're going on almost 72 hours here. I come back and I pull it down, and it's those same bandages. All right. So I don't want to disparage governmental services at all. I know that the caregivers and the workers there were doing their best, but it was very obvious to me that they were understaffed and they were undersupplied, and they were just doing the best they could with what they had. And so at that point, we ended up hiring a private nurse to come and sit with my grandfather. And that cost was about $5,000 a month, which my mother and I split the cost for that to try and get him the care he needed. And I have to tell you, as a young mother, paying for daycare, trying to work, trying to save up, that was a hit. And as my mother, who was just on a fixed income herself, that was a hit. So this is the biggest gap I see. That's why we're here today.
Thank you very much. And well, I imagine many people have experienced something like this in their families. Show of hands, anybody who've had to deal with that? Yeah, it's tough. So I would say that I guess what's important about the story is that it is, it's very personal, but it's also not uncommon. So one of the things that Jessica's going to talk a little bit about is sort of what the hidden costs of aging are, if you want to discuss that a little bit. But I heard you say that there's sort of 4 stages of aging. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, and Nick's heard me speak on this many times before. So there are typically 4 recognizable stages of aging, and each stage brings with it certain cares and focuses that I like to really make sure the whole family is prepared for. So the first phase is your independence, right? You're excited, you're retired, you're living your life. That's typically for most people age 50 through age 70s or so. You're active, you're traveling. We're focusing as far as financial planning goes. I'm really looking at your income streams, maximizing your tax, the timing. Are we pulling from IRAs? Where are we pulling these funds from? We're talking a little bit about Medicare, signing up for that, doing some due diligence. And we're starting to think mainly about your real estate. Nick, you touched on this earlier, but making decisions before you have to is often a much better situation than making decisions in that crisis moment. So starting to talk about, are you going to keep your property? Are you going to downsize? Are you going to relocate closer to family? These are things we need to think through. So that's phase 1. Phase 2 is interdependence phase. So this is where you're starting to need a little help, right? You might be able to still live on your own, but you're becoming reliant on others. Maybe that's for transportation. Maybe that's you're not out there pushing a lawnmower anymore or gardening. You need help, increased maintenance cost. There's certainly increased healthcare cost. This phase in particular, your expenses, everybody thinks, oh, I'll when I retire, my expenses will drop. I won't need as much in retirement. That's actually not the case. Your expenses are going to rise about 10 to 30% during this phase. And then, of course, we absolutely have to make sure you've got your documents in order. And I think we're going to touch on that a little bit later. What is a power of attorney? How does it work? What does your banker need to know about you? All right, third phase, dependence. Dependence, hopefully for everybody in here, is well into your 80s before you are fully dependent on somebody else. But this could be at any stage in your life, as evidenced by my grandfather. It could be memory care. It could be home health care. It could be a long-term care facility. And so this is really where we need to focus on not just the funding, but the family dynamics. It is really important that we have conversations before you get to this point. Where do you expect to live? Who do you expect to help you? If you say, oh, my children will help, did you have that conversation with them? Do they know that they're going to be helping you? So I want to make sure we have family planning sessions around this before you get there.
Nothing like being voluntold.
Yes. But oftentimes, at that point, you are not living in your home. You are probably in a facility, a long-term care facility of some sort. And so then we need to make some real estate decisions at that point as well. Do we maintain the property? Do we try and rent it out to gain some income to help pay for the long-term care facility? Do we sell? Do we invest? How does, Medicare, Medicaid play into that situation? So we're going to be taking a look at it. And finally, the end-of-life care, which is, for anybody in end of life, we're really just focusing on comfort and dignity. But at that point, it's preparing the family. What does probate look like? What are the next steps? How do you go through this? Is everything titled correctly? So every stage of your aging comes with specific concerns.
Thank you. And in your work today, when you're dealing with people, how often do you see people sort of underestimating the inevitability of things and the costs?
Every single client. It is every single person that comes through my door, gives me a phone call. Everybody focuses on the retirement, the fun part. And most people do also focus on the end game, right? What do my estate documents look like? What are my wishes? Very few people really plan for those middle two phases. So you mentioned cost. I'd like to give a cost reality check. So these are some fun stats. All right. On average, home health care costs about $75,000 to $85,000 per year. And to maintain your home health care and live there, you typically need to do modifications. And so the national estimates for home modifications just to age in place are anywhere from $25,000 to $100,000, or in Northern Virginia, I've seen a lot higher than that. And so home modifications could be your stair lift. It could be a zero entry bathtub or a bathtub retrofitter where you've got the door and you're walking in. It's bars just to help yourself on to the toilet, onto the bathroom. In cases where you're losing mobility, it could be widening the doors so a wheelchair can go through. When you have even a few steps to get into the house or in the garage, you need to start thinking about getting a ramp installed. What does a ramp look like? You can rent them. But if you're going to live there long term, you may want to have one installed and built for you. And so these are all considerations for home health care. All right, so national nursing care costs, this is long-term nursing care. In Northern Virginia, it's going to run $130,000 to $150,000 per year. If you need memory care, on average, that's $200,000 a year. Okay, so how long do people need this kind of care? Well, on average, women need anywhere from 3 to 4 years, and men need anywhere from 2 to 3 years of this kind of care. So if you need memory care and you're, a female, that's $800,000 that you could need that care. What does that look like, and what does that do to your plan? The reality is over 70% of the people here in this room today is going to need some kind of care.
Yeah. Frightening, sobering numbers, for sure. And I think a lot of people that we find, just a little aside, in our practice is we run into a lot of people that are in their, 70s, 80s, who are just kind of stuck. They don't know what to do. They're overwhelmed. And one case in point is I spoke to, they're not technically clients yet, but we've been talking to them for several years. And when I talked to him last year, he said, yeah, Nick, my wife's not in great shape. We really do need to make a decision before somebody has to make a decision for us. And I just thought that hit me in the gut. And I just talked to them. I talked to her a couple of days ago, and she said, yeah, we're still here. He had to have a leg amputated due to some vascular issues, and he was fit as a fiddle, probably about 80 years old. And she needs 2 knee replacements. And she goes, but we're not moving. We're putting in a chairlift. We're putting in, I think he hit it on the head last year when I talked to him. We really should be making a decision and not having a decision forced on us. So, but talk a little bit about what the healthcare system, Medicare, Medicaid. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, everybody's favorite topic. The United States healthcare system. All right.
And if you're not on Medicare right now, you will be at some point,
yes.
Chris.
So for those in the room that do not know, one of the common myths is that Medicare will cover anything I need in my aging, and that is not true. Medicare is not built for long-term care. It is for short-term care only. So you have Part A, which covers your hospital. You have Part B, which covers doctors, x-rays, MRIs, that sort of thing. And Part D covers your prescriptions. To qualify for Medicare, you have to have 2 qualifications here. And when I say qualify, I'm talking about to get them to cover your skilled nursing expense. First, your day 0 through 20 is covered by Medicare. But to get anything longer than that, you have to have had an inpatient hospital stay for at least 3 days. Okay? Now, here's the tricky part. This used to be a really easy designation. If you spent the night in the hospital, that counted as inpatient for the day. That no longer is happening. There had been some abuses of the system, and so auditors have started going out to the hospital. As a result, some doctors will code you as under observation. And Medicare is very clear they will not cover an observation expense. That does not count. So if you have a heart attack and you're recovering, but they want to keep you, I would say please stay. That's what your doctor's telling you. I'm not telling you not to do it. But go ahead and ask the question, am I going to be classified as inpatient or is this going to be classified as observation? And ask them what their reasoning is. You may have a chance to get them to change that mind. So you've got to be inpatient for 3 days. Then you have to be making continuous improvement. That's the second qualification. So if you have a stroke and you're in a vegetative state and it's day 20 and you have not been making improvement, they're going to kick you out of that program and they are not going to pick up the bill anymore. If you have long-term care insurance, typically that starts at day 90. So what do you do when you are in that state from day 20 to day 90 and you need care? You are out of pocket for that. And we need to make sure you've got the reserves and you're planning for it. Because that could be a hefty bill and it can be a surprise. So Medicare will cover up through day 100. After that, you've got to start self-funding, or if you've spent through your assets, that's where Medicaid kicks in. And I think you asked me to continue on Medicaid.
Yeah.
Okay, so Medicaid is state-run. It is for those who have spent through their assets. So you can have no more than $2,000 in the state of Virginia to qualify for Medicaid, all right? But once Medicaid kicks in, they do cover everything. They will pay for home health care, they'll pay for your facility. But as I already told you with my grandfather, you get what you pay for, right? So beggars cannot be choosers. You don't get to go and figure out where you're going to be placed. Medicare, they will not take your primary residence, but I want to be very clear about this. People think I get to keep my primary. It's just while you're alive. So if you need long-term care for years, on your death, they are going to come after those assets after you have passed. And so a lot of people will come to me and say, can't I just add my daughter or my son to the title? Then it's joint. It bypasses probate and it goes straight to my son or daughter. They'll never know. They will know. There's IRS audits. They'll know. There is a 5-year look back. So if you've owned that asset in the last 5 years, even if you gave it away, they're going to come after it. Okay. I can get into this a little bit more. I don't recommend giving property to your children. You lose your step-up and cost basis completely. So let me back up and explain what that is. If you bought the house for $200,000, it's now worth $1 million. Your cost basis is that $200,000, and if you add somebody to the title or you give that property away, that cost basis becomes theirs. But if they inherit that property instead, on the date of your death, whatever that fair market value is, that becomes the cost basis. So they're not going to have to pay capital gains tax. And so it could save them thousands and thousands of dollars by just saying, I'm going to inherit this. So there's some different planning in place if you want to ensure it goes to one child versus another. We could talk about that separately. But Medicaid and Medicare takes some extra planning for sure.
Thank you. And this is sort of a personal story that goes way back. Can't remember. It was the one on Cardinal. Yep. True story about how real estate really got messed up on this. Just lack of knowing. So somebody at our church, she was in her, let's call it 50s, had a adopted young daughter who was in her teens, I guess, at that time. Her mother, our friend's mother, was in memory care in Fairfax, Medicaid, but she was freaking out because they were going to kick her out because she still had an asset, which was the house over in Sterling, who she decided to gift. She let her granddaughter live in there by herself at 17. Well, we got involved, and one of the things was that the memory care facility said, we can't hold on to her any longer. She has an asset that's worth something. So we're trying to figure out how to sell this thing to keep her from getting kicked out onto the street. Well, the little demon child really wrecked the place. I mean, just, it was bad. There were mattresses on the floor, drugs, needles, everything. And she destroyed a beautiful home. So we had to, yeah, the smell. Anyway, but so we kicked into action, and we had to basically short sell it. Did we actually short sell it? No, we couldn't short sell it. We got somebody, an investor, who wanted to actually buy it and live in it, but completely gut it. But it was sold at pennies for the dollar. The only plus side is that our friend, the daughter, the middle one, really got nothing out of this. We got rid of the teenage daughter and was able to keep the grandmother in memory care, but we had to get rid of that asset really, really quickly. But that's something they never even thought about. And the other lesson is just don't let a 17-year-old girl command a four-bedroom home. Bad idea. Yeah. Black mold, everything. Yeah.
So what she could have walked away with was hundreds and thousands of dollars, really was probably 200 less, because we had to sell it as is spirit, which means the buyer had to empty the house. And it was, in our opinion, not, at that
Yeah.
point, it really needed, there were animals inside, there were just everything that you can imagine. And this was a buyer, this was a buyer, not an investor, and he did end up selling the house, I want to say for 400 more than what he paid for it. He did a beautiful job. I don't know that I would have lived in that house. It was a little toxic for me. But we were on a deadline, because they were going to toss her out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she had nowhere to go.
So that sort of gets into the question of, in your practice, you see a lot of what happens with planning, but what kinds of real estate issues do you see when you're in a crisis mode?
Yeah, so the timing becomes the issue. And I think that's what you were saying. I'll take, again, how selling real estate could impact even your Medicare premiums. So Medicare is based off of what's called IRMA, and it's a 2-year look back, rolling average of your modified adjust gross income on your IRS statement. So if you sell a property and you're age 63, those gains that you have artificially bump up your income. And so for the next 2 years, your Medicare premium, when you qualify at age 65, they're going to be higher than what they should be, even though that wasn't recurring income. It was just a one-time hit. And so I have seen people get surprised 2 years later and say, why am I so high? I don't understand. I'm 500, 600 over where I should be. And by the way, there's 2 of them. So for the next 2 years, that could be $24,000 that you're making in payments to the government that you didn't really need if we had just planned ahead, if we had just got your property sold prior to age 63. So just little things like that matter and they're important. The planning matters, the timing matters for what are we going to do with these funds? Do we need to invest them? Can that carry us longer in your plan? And if you have longevity in your family, you could live to 95. I have a client who's pushing 100 right now, and that was not in the plan back in, whoever did it back in the early 90s. So what do we need to do to help bridge the gap? And real estate, to Donna's point, oftentimes is the largest asset that people are holding. So how do we fix that?
Yeah, and that was something that I was going to also ask is what are the risks that people don't consider when their home becomes the largest asset they have? I think you covered some of that.
Well,
and,
I'll go
Yeah.
even further into that. Your home, I don't need to tell you, it's not liquid. You can't go buy an Arby's burger with your home. You need cash. You need cash flow. You need funds for the unexpected expenses. How are you going to finance that? And so if that becomes your largest asset, we have no choice but to really start looking at some programs like Medicaid, but also reverse mortgages, things of that nature. And what that's really doing is putting you in a situation where you're losing control. Everything we're talking about here today is meant to encourage you to maintain control of your wishes and your finances as long as you possibly can. And so you don't want to lose your options. That's really where I would answer that question.
So
Yeah.
all good. And by the way, we will take questions after we wrap up here because this is really, we want to make it as conversational as possible. But so we've talked about health care, government programs, real estate, all major pieces. But let's talk a little bit about how this all comes together in a plan. How do you plan? When do you start planning? Is it ever too early?
No. Answer's no.
Or is it ever too late?
It's never too late. There is a concern for every stage of life. Okay, planning, getting in early helps us. It gives us options. If we need to look at long-term care insurance, for example, to bridge the gaps, we can do that. What I would say, if you're already in these phases and you've got some of your plans together, it does not hurt to get a second opinion. We don't charge for financial plans. I encourage you, don't just do the planning yourself. I oftentimes see clients come in and they don't want to share their assets or their wishes with the rest of their family. They said, oh, they can find out what I have when I pass. That's all right. There's nothing wrong with that. But they're going to be a huge part of helping you through these years. It is oftentimes better to have a family planning meeting. If you're ever going to have one, you should have one not just about your wishes when you pass, but also wishes and expectation level while you're aging. Go so far as to list basics, right? Where are your bills paid? Who's your electric company? Who's your insurance agent? Think about what it would take to de-ravel your life and write that list down. Because again, if you have a stroke today or you get hit by a car and they've got to just step in suddenly, have it together, have it ready to go. And I do want to talk briefly about documentation, if I could. This is really important. So I oftentimes will have someone come in, a child of a client, and say, I've got a power of attorney, here it is, they're in the hospital. As a banker, as a financial advisor, we want to know that ahead of time. We want that on record ahead of time. I need to be able to verify it. Oftentimes, if you're working with a big corporation, I'm talking Vanguard, Merrill Lynch, some of the big ones, they have their own paperwork that you have to have in place and notarized. They won't just take a power of attorney off the street. And so having that in place before you get to that moment is critical. I tell people, please introduce me to your children. I would like to see them. I would like to know them. Fill out a trusted contact form. Don't be afraid of that. I'm not going to tell them your personal finances, but if I see fraud going on, if there is all of a sudden this caregiver in your life and they are convincing you to take money out and do different things that is off plan, off what I know of my personal relationship with you, I need somebody to call and say, hey, I'm raising my hand. I think something's going on. Do you know what's happening? This is critical. As a banker, I can only do so much. So I can put a hold on the account for up to 30 days if I file an injunction with the court saying I think elder abuse is happening. After that, if they don't have a conclusive reading, I have to give, that's legally their money. And if they want to wire it to South Africa, there's really nothing I can do above and beyond that. And this happens every single day. I had a client come in. She is in her 80s, late 80s. Unfortunately, her husband of 46 years just passed away. And so we were sitting and we're meeting through the next step, which she needed to call Social Security, make sure she turns off Social Security, make sure she files for survivorship benefits. And we talked through all of that. And I'm so glad I mentioned there's a lot of fraud going on. Social Security is not going to call you unexpectedly and ask for information. That doesn't happen, okay? You are going to be booking an appointment, either on the phone, they'll give you a 15-minute window, or you will be going in person to Reston. If somebody calls you and says they're from Social Security, hang up, look up the number, and give them a call. She got a phone call, just like I said. They said that they needed more information. They didn't have something written down correctly. Thank goodness she hung up. When she reversed that number in Google, it was that fraud scam, the 410 that's going around. I can't tell you how many of these are happening. Unfortunately, you're a prime target for this. So start introducing your family members and trusted contacts to the advisors in your life.
It's interesting you say that, and because I think we've all known somebody who has passed, an elderly person, et cetera, and then a surviving spouse is sitting there. It's it's a tough time because you've lost somebody that's close to you. They may have always dealt with the finances, and you have no idea where to even start. And many people don't have somebody like Jessica to help walk them through it, and they are just ripe for this kind of fraud that's out there. You also mentioned about talking with the family. Do you get a lot of pushback on, if there is a number of children, of having kind of orchestrating a family meeting? Because you could tell them that and they'll kind of nod their head, but is that something that you find you could be a little pushy to do to get them to do that?
Everybody's got different personalities in their family. I would say with multiple children, for whatever reason, the oldest always seems to take the lead in a lot of conversations. Not always, but there's always one dominant voice, it seems like, in a meeting. And so we have to be careful to make sure all voices are being heard, even if it's maybe a younger sibling that takes a step back and lets that dominant voice talk. So I handle not just the wealth side, but also the trust. So what that means is that I can actually go and file probate for families. I can inventory homes. I can sell businesses. I can do what I need to do as long as we are named fiduciary corporate trustee. And so what I will do in that case, we will have a family meeting. I will give them the information. This is how I work. I want the family to be included, but ultimately, if there's a tie between who wants mom's brooch, we're going to flip a coin and we're going to make a decision and move on. Or if two children want this house and they don't want to sell it, it becomes a normal bidding war just like any other sale. Who's willing to pay more for it or give up more in their inheritance for it? My role in any conversation is not to dominate or tell you how it's going to be. It's to manage opinions, manage expectations, and make sure I'm tie breaking and keeping things fair. So I'm just a mediator when it comes to things like that.
No easy task. I'm sure, we see just from the real estate side, we see a lot of these situations that really have nothing to do with real estate. It's just, the family dynamics, surviving children, dealing with all of this. And that's why I think this is our first lunch and learn. And I was talking to Jessica and I said, boy, this is a great one to start with because it's all about planning ahead. And nobody, frankly, thinks they're going to die. I mean, they're like, that'll be another year and this and that. But I think what we see, which is sad sometimes from the real estate side, is that somebody dies unexpectedly sometimes where all of a sudden it creates chaos in the family. And they say something about doing a will or a trust is sort of your love letter to your family is people put it off. And I think there's some statistic out there that something like 70% of Americans don't even have a simple will, which then causes even more chaos. So that's why I think, I appreciate, Jessica, what you do because it's the stuff we don't do. We can point people to you. And say, guys, before it's too late, before, if you love your family, which isn't always the case, but if you love your family, start planning ahead. Talk to somebody like Jessica who thinks through these things that can guide you into making better decisions to create less chaos when the inevitable happens. So, but I do think that, your insights have been really good, made me think a little bit more, too, about, yikes, have we thought through everything? And we've got 3 kids, what would happen if Donna and I disappeared in a flight or, one of us dies before the other, those kinds of things. And nobody really that's not a fun conversation where you're just sitting there, hey, honey, tonight, let's talk about planning. So that's why I'm just wondering, do you have any advice about how to format that or to engage people so that it's not something that's so awkward?
Absolutely. So it is a love letter. So coming at it from a place of, I love you enough to plan it so that when you are at your emotional lowest, you've just lost me, you are not having to make these kind of decisions, wondering, what would I have wanted? Am I making you proud? Those are the questions that circulate. I know everyone in here has lost a loved one, and you start questioning all of the things, past conversations, am I making the right choices, right decisions? If you can map it out for them, you are giving a gift. So start big picture plan. What would I want to see happen? Be honest with yourself. If you have children that spend money faster than they make it, okay, accept them as they are and let's plan around that. Let's put some guardrails in place, okay? If you have a child who's married to somebody that you don't like and you're not actually betting on them lasting, okay, let's accept that for what it is and let's put guardrails around that and protect your assets against alimony. There are ways to do these things. There's solutions. What you're doing is you're trying to give a gift. You're not trying to take control from the grave. That's not it. It's about the planning. Once you get that high level done, whether that looks like a will, power of attorney, medical directive, or if you have enough assets and it makes sense to do a trust, you could do that too. Then you start going into the minute detail. And that's where I really tell you, list out every bill you have, list out your assets, where they're located. I tell people, make sure somebody knows how to get into your phone and to your Gmail, because all the other passwords could probably be reset with just those 2 things. Think through it. And when you're doing your long-term care, go ahead and do some research. If you want to stay in the house, think about who you would use for your own home health care at home. There's tons of companies around. Go ahead and do the interview yourself. make a list. Here's my top 3. And if they're not available, maybe here's a 4th. I can't tell you when my grandfather had his instant stroke, I was doing the phone calls and I didn't know what I was doing. I was in my mid-20s and I was trying to figure it out, and I didn't know what an average cost was. I didn't know what to look for or who to trust. That was really tough. And if I could have avoided that, if somebody could have just put a paper in front of me and said, here it is, that would have been a blessing.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And unless you have something more to say, I was going to open this up to hot seat questions. Does anybody have any questions? And Phil, we're going to pass the microphone around. If you could hold it kind of up there so we can capture the questions, that would be great.
And if you've been through a divorce, guys, make sure you change that beneficiary. It does not happen automatically.
My question is, were you saying that reverse mortgages are really not a very good
Yeah, so reverse mortgages are a tool like any other. For the right client, it makes sense. I don't necessarily, it's not my go-to. I want to keep control of the liquid assets. I would much rather we go ahead and offload that property in a sale. We invest that. We can be very conservative if we need to. That's a personal preference. Reverse mortgages, I have seen them go wrong. I've seen them get too much money out when they didn't actually need the money, and then later on down the road, it's already spent and they don't even have the home asset anymore. So if that is something we're going to introduce, it's going to be at the tail end. It's going to be a last minute that we really don't have any other choices. It's not my number one choice.
Okay. Any other questions? Chris?
It's not a question, but I'm a mortgage loan officer. 100% what Jessica just said. It is a very specific tool that's maybe good for a small number of people, but when I sit with people that are contemplating it and look at this is what a reverse mortgage may do, this is what selling it may do, and how we could then utilize those liquid funds better, and Nick and Jessica can come into it, highly, highly recommend that. So talk to somebody. Have an advisor. Jessica keeps mentioning talk to your advisor teams, right? Very important. But yeah, 100% they're correct there.
Great. Kim?
I just wanted to reiterate about having the trusted contact, because when I was in financial services, we did see somebody's account go from quite significant to almost nothing, and he would not believe that his friend was scamming him out of all this money. By the time we finally got in touch, had him say yes to getting his son involved, it was too late for everything. So please do that trusted contact. It's so important for your protection.
Okay. Any other questions? I have a question. I'm just curious. Many years ago now, 15 years ago or so, I've always been a big kind of insurance person anyway. My mama brought me up right, I guess. Donna and I got long-term care insurance, I think, when we were in our mid-50s, late 50s. And it's not cheap. But I've also heard that it's more and more difficult to get long-term insurance. Can you talk a little bit about long-term care insurance, what you're seeing out there, what is a good age to get it if it is available, and how it may play into long-term planning?
Absolutely. So long-term care, obviously you want to try and apply before you need it, right? Once you are already having health issues, it becomes very difficult to qualify for it. Or if you do qualify, the premiums are through the roof. If you can apply in your 50s, that's probably the ideal time range to apply for it. Typical long-term care could be $2,000, $4,000 a month. A year. And it's really it's there to cover that gap between what Medicare does not cover and jumping into Medicaid by spending your assets down. So oftentimes it's not just for your protection, but it's also a legacy protection. It allows us not to use so much of your assets, and you can pass it to the next generation. So yeah, I actually do recommend insurance. I recommend long-term care insurance. I recommend supplemental insurance for Medicare. There are gap insurances for Medicare. There's all kinds of insurances if you have family history of cancer or heart disease or stroke or memory care, you can get added policies.